I'm a 36-year-old businesswoman who grew up in a family that never believed in me. At our annual dinner last Thanksgiving, my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're becoming an embarrassment to the family name." Everyone laughed. Little did they know I'd purchased their beloved Riverside Mall 2 years earlier through a shell company. They've been shopping at my property, praising my management decisions, all while mocking my career. Tonight at the Christmas charity gala, they'll finally learn the truth. Before I dive into how I turned my family's mockery into my greatest triumph, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories about turning pain into power. My childhood in the Anderson family was defined by wealth status and crushing expectations. My father, Richard Anderson, built his fortune in real estate development, turning abandoned properties into thriving commercial spaces across 3 states. My mother, Diana, maintained our family's social status, organizing charity events and country club gatherings, where appearance mattered more than substance. Then there were my older brothers, James and Thomas, who followed my father's footsteps perfectly. James joined the family business right after college, while Thomas went to law school before handling the legal side of my father's empire. They were the golden children, the perfect heirs to the Anderson legacy. I was different from the beginning. While my brothers talked about construction sites and investment portfolios, I found myself fascinated by the actual businesses that operated in my father's buildings. I wanted to understand why some stores thrived while others failed, what made customers return to certain shops, and how retail spaces could be designed for maximum impact. "Olivia's just playing shop," my mother would say with a dismissive wave whenever I talked about retail management at dinner. "She'll grow out of it." I never did. I graduated from business school with honors specializing in retail management and commercial operations. My family attended my graduation ceremony. Reluctantly, my father checking his watch, throughout my mother making comments about other career paths that would be more suitable for an Anderson. After graduation, I took jobs with several national retail chains, learning operations from the ground up. Each time I mentioned a promotion or achievement at family gatherings, it was met with polite nods or subtle eye rolls. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say. "But when are you going to do something serious with your life?" By 26, I'd had enough. I withdrew my modest savings, took out a small business loan, and moved to Portland, 3 hours from my hometown of Seattle. There, away from my family's shadow and constant judgment, I opened my first boutique store. The first year was brutal. I worked 16-hour days, lived in a tiny apartment above the shop, and put everything I had into making it work. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if my family was right about me all along. But slowly, surely, customers came. Then they returned. Then they brought friends. By year 3, I had enough capital to open a second location. By year 5, I had a small chain of boutiques across Oregon and was ready to face my family again. I thought 5 years of proven success would finally earn their respect. I couldn't have been more wrong. After 5 years of building my business in Portland, I returned to Seattle for my father's 60th birthday celebration. I arrived with confidence, bringing financial statements showing my growing retail chain's success and a gift I thought would impress him, a rare vintage watch from a brand he collected. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Everyone commented on how well I looked, though my mother immediately suggested I should dress more appropriately for family functions, rather than in my business casual attire. Still, I was determined to stay positive. When conversation turned to business matters, I seized my opportunity. "I've expanded to 5 locations now," I said proudly. The newest store broke even in just 4 months, which is practically unheard of in retail. My father barely looked up from his steak. "That's nice, Olyvia, but we're talking about real estate. James just closed on that office complex downtown, $40 million deal." "Small potatoes, really," James added with a smirk. "But I guess your little shops are cute too." My mother patted my hand condescendingly. "Darling, wouldn't it be easier to just find a good husband who can give you a real career? The Anderson name could open so many doors for the right son-in-law." Thomas laughed. "Who needs a real job when you can play store owner, our little sister the shopkeeper?" I forced a smile and changed the subject, but inside I was crushed. Nothing had changed. 5 years of hard work meant nothing to them. The real blow came the next morning. I'd scheduled a meeting with Seattle First National Bank to discuss financing for expansion into the Washington market. I arrived early confident and prepared only to have the loan officer look uncomfortable the moment he saw my name. "I'm sorry, Ms. Anderson, but your application has been flagged in our system." "Flagged? What does that mean?" He shifted awkwardly. "Your father called yesterday. He suggested we should exercise extreme caution with any business proposals from you. As a major client of our bank, we take his input very seriously." I felt the blood drain from my face. My father blocked my loan application. Not officially, but his concerns carry significant weight. "Perhaps you could discuss this with him and come back later." I drove straight to my father's office, shaking with anger and hurt. When I confronted him, his response was infuriatingly calm. "I was protecting you from failure, Olyvia. Expanding too quickly is how businesses collapse. You should thank me. Thank you for sabotaging me, for not believing in me after 5 years of proven success." He sighed heavily. "This isn't a game, Olyvia. Real business involves risks and consequences you don't understand. Your little boutiques are fine for now, but Seattle is different. You're just not ready." I left his office in tears, the painful realization settling in that my family would never see my potential. No matter what I achieved, I would always be the misguided daughter playing at business in their eyes. As I drove back to my hotel completely alone in the city I grew up in, I made a decision that would change everything. If my family would never willingly give me their respect, I would have to take it. The drive back to Portland was the longest 3 hours of my life, but also the most clarifying. With each mile, my tears dried and my resolve strengthened. I wasn't going to let my family define my worth anymore. I would prove them wrong, not just with modest success, but with something they couldn't possibly ignore or dismiss. Within a month of returning, I completely pivoted my business strategy. While maintaining my retail stores as my public focus, I began studying commercial real estate and property management. I needed to understand my father's world better than he did if I was ever going to earn his respect, or failing that beat him at his own game. Fortune brought me Margaret Winters, a 60-year-old property developer who had battled her way through the male-dominated real estate world of the 70s and 80s. I met her when she came into my flagship store looking for a gift for her granddaughter. "You've got good instincts," she said after watching me handle a difficult customer. "This location, your layout, your inventory mix. You understand space and people." When I mentioned my interest in commercial real estate, she gave me her card. "Call me if you're serious. This business needs more women with actual retail experience making decisions about retail spaces." Margaret became my mentor, teaching me everything about commercial property that business school never covered. The relationships, the timing, the unwritten rules, and most importantly, how to spot opportunities others missed. "Most developers think about buildings," she told me. "Smart ones think about tenants. The brilliant ones think about customers. You already understand customers, so you're starting ahead." 6 months into my real estate education, I learned something interesting through industry connections: Riverside Mall. The crown jewel of Seattle's shopping scene and my family's favorite weekend destination was struggling financially. The ownership group was quietly looking for an exit. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Riverside wasn't just any mall. It was where my mother shopped every weekend, where my father pointed out his superior design choices to colleagues, where my brothers took their dates to impress them. I began putting together a plan, working nights and weekends while still running my retail business. I studied Riverside's financials, tenant mix, and customer demographics. I identified exactly what was wrong. The management was stuck in old retail paradigms, failing to adapt to changing consumer habits. The work was grueling. I developed migraines from lack of sleep. My weight dropped. Friends worried I was pushing myself too hard. But every time I considered slowing down, I remembered my father's dismissive tone. "Your little shops are fine for now." With Margaret's guidance, I made my first property acquisition, a small office building in Portland that had been mismanaged for years. I secured financing through Margaret's connections, renovated strategically, brought in new tenants, and sold it 18 months later for a 40% profit. This gave me both capital and credibility. I formed a small investment group, mostly women business owners, Margaret had introduced me to. We began acquiring undervalued properties, improving them, and either selling for profit or maintaining them for ongoing income. Through all this, I kept tabs on Riverside Mall and my family's business. Industry sources revealed my father's company was overextended, having made several large acquisitions just before the market softened. They weren't in danger, but they weren't in position to make major new investments either. The time was right. I created Pacific Northwest Holdings, a shell company that couldn't be traced back to me, and began laying groundwork for the acquisition that would change everything. Acquiring Riverside Mall required months of meticulous planning and absolute discretion. I hired a private investigator to compile a detailed report on the mall's financial troubles, confirming what my sources had suggested: occupancy was down 12%, foot traffic had decreased steadily for 3 years, and the current ownership group was divided on future strategy. Through Margaret's connections, I arranged a meeting with Westfield Development Group, the majority owner of Riverside Mall. I was careful to use my married name from a brief marriage in my 20s, Wilson, rather than Anderson. Seattle's business community was small, and I couldn't risk my family learning of my involvement. The mall needs complete repositioning, I told the ownership group. Your tenant mix is outdated, your public spaces are uninspiring, and your marketing strategy is straight from 2005. But the bones are excellent, and the location is irreplaceable. They were impressed by my analysis, but skeptical of my experience. Pacific Northwest Holdings has completed similar renovations in Portland and Tacoma. I assured them, carefully sidestepping that those properties had been much smaller. Sometimes confidence is all you need to bridge experience gaps. The bidding process was nerve-wracking. There were 2 other interested parties, including a large national mall operator. I stretched my investor group to its financial limit, securing additional backing from a venture capital firm that specialized in commercial real estate turnarounds. When my phone rang with news that our bid had been accepted, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I alternated between hysterical laughter and tears of relief. I had done it. I now owned my family's favorite mall. The acquisition was reported in business journals, but with Pacific Northwest Holdings listed as the buyer and Olyvia Wilson as the managing director, my family remained oblivious. I moved quickly to implement changes, bringing in a mix of established brands and innovative local businesses, redesigning common areas to create more community spaces, and introducing events that drew new demographics. Within 18 months, occupancy was up to 97%, revenues had increased 23%, and Riverside Mall was being featured in retail industry publications as a case study in successful mall revitalization. My mother continued her weekend shopping trips there, complimenting the lovely improvements. My father brought business associates to lunch at the new restaurants, taking credit for having always said the place had potential. My brothers posted social media check-ins from the mall's events. Once I overheard my brother James at a restaurant talking to associates, "Whoever took over Riverside really knows what they're doing. They've created exactly the kind of shopping experience people want today." I simply smiled into my wine glass and said nothing. The stage was set for the final act in my long game of family redemption. 2 years after acquiring Riverside Mall, I found myself once again at the Anderson family Thanksgiving gathering. The familiar setting of my childhood home now felt like a strange museum of past hurts, preserved perfectly in time, while I had changed completely. My retail business had expanded to 15 locations across 3 states, but this success remained invisible to my family. What they couldn't see was how these stores served as excellent tenant testing grounds for my growing real estate portfolio, now including 6 shopping centers with Riverside as the crown jewel. "James closed the Westlake Tower deal," my father announced proudly during dinner. "Largest acquisition in the company's history." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish my brother's failure. "And what about you, Olivia?" my mother asked, with her practiced society smile. "Still with those little boutiques?" Before I could answer, my father interjected. "Did you know I've been advising the new ownership at Riverside Mall? They've implemented several of my suggestions for the food court renovation." This was a complete fabrication. I'd never spoken to my father about Riverside, and the food court redesign had been entirely my vision influenced by European market halls rather than traditional mall dining. "Really?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "That's interesting." "Yes," he continued, warming to his lie. "They're new to the Seattle market, so they reached out for some local expertise. Glad to see they had the sense to listen." My brothers exchanged knowing looks, clearly aware of father's exaggeration but playing along. The conversation shifted to my appearance, always a favorite topic of my mother's. "Olivia, darling, you really should have worn something more appropriate," she said, eyeing my simple black dress. "The Richardsons will be stopping by later, and their son Michael is recently divorced. This could be your chance." "I'm not interested in being set up, Mother." "Well, you should be. You're not getting any younger and your little career can only take you so far." Thomas snickered. "Yeah, Olivia. Don't you want a husband who can buy you a mall instead of a shop?" The table erupted in laughter and my father delivered the crushing blow. "You're becoming an embarrassment to the family name Olyvia. When will you accept that this retail game of yours isn't working out?" I felt my cheeks burn as everyone laughed harder. Excusing myself to the bathroom, I finally allowed the tears to fall. After all my success, nothing had changed in their eyes. I was still the family disappointment, the punchline to their jokes. My phone buzzed with a text from my mall manager. "Pipe burst near north entrance. Flooding in 3 stores. Need approval for emergency repairs." I splashed water on my face, reapplied my makeup, and returned to the dining room with newfound determination. "I need to go," I announced, gathering my coat. "There's an emergency at my property." "Your property?" my father scoffed. "Did one of your little shops run out of scented candles?" I paused at the door, almost revealing everything in that moment of hurt and anger. Instead, I simply said, "You'll see soon enough," and left them to their laughter. The annual Christmas charity gala at Riverside Mall had become the social event of the season under my ownership. This year would be extra special, as I had finally decided to reveal myself as the owner. The invitation sent to my family mentioned that the mysterious owner of Riverside Mall would be making a first public appearance, knowing this would be irresistible to my status-conscious parents. The grand court of the mall had been transformed into a winter wonderland with towering crystal and silver decorations, gourmet catering stations, and a central stage for the evening's program. 200 of Seattle's most influential business people and socialites mingled under twinkling lights, including my entire family who had arrived early to secure a good position for networking with the unknown mall owner. I watched from a private security monitor as my mother commented on the exquisite decorations, and my father held court, likely still pretending to have influence over the mall's operations. My brothers worked the room, shaking hands and collecting business cards. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a custom midnight blue gown that projected both elegance and authority. My normally simple makeup was flawless, my hair styled professionally. No one would be commenting on my appearance tonight. At precisely 8:30, the master of ceremonies approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 3rd annual Riverside Mall Christmas Charity Gala. Tonight's event has already raised over $300,000 for children's education in our community." Applause filled the space as I positioned myself at the entrance to the grand court, out of my family's line of sight. And now the moment many of you have been waiting for. It is my honor to introduce the visionary behind Riverside Mall's remarkable transformation, the owner and managing director of Pacific Northwest Holdings, Ms. Olyvia Wilson Anderson. I entered to enthusiastic applause, smiling confidently as I made my way to the stage. I caught sight of my family's faces as recognition dawned. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's jaw literally dropped. James and Thomas stood slack-jawed and wide-eyed. Taking the microphone, I delivered a brief speech about the mall's community commitment and future plans, never once acknowledging that anything unusual was happening. I thanked everyone for coming, emphasized the importance of the charitable cause, and invited everyone to continue enjoying the evening. As I stepped down from the stage, guests swarmed me with congratulations and questions. Through the crowd, I could see my family regrouping, my father's face now flushed with what looked like anger, my mother frantically whispering to anyone who would listen. Eventually, they made their way to me. A security staff member I had briefed earlier smoothly guided us all to a private room off the main court. The door had barely closed when my father exploded. "What the hell is this, Olyvia? Some kind of elaborate prank? Or have you been deliberately deceiving us for years?" I remained perfectly calm. "I've been building a business, Father. Exactly what you always claimed to want for me. By hiding behind fake company names, by pretending to be someone else. Pacific Northwest Holdings is a legitimate company. Olyvia Wilson is my legal name from my marriage. I've hidden nothing. You simply never bothered to look beyond your assumptions about me." My mother found her voice. "But darling, why didn't you tell us? We would have been so proud." I couldn't help but laugh. "Proud you've spent years telling me I'm an embarrassment. At Thanksgiving, you all laughed at my little career while sitting in the very mall I own." "We didn't know," Thomas said weakly. "That's exactly the point. You never tried to know. You decided who I was years ago and never bothered to update your opinion, even as evidence to the contrary was literally all around you." I turned to my father. "You claimed to be advising me on the food court renovation. That was a complete fabrication. You've been shopping in my mall, eating in my restaurants, attending my events, all while mocking my business acumen." For once, Richard Anderson had no ready response. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I continued, "I have guests to attend to. We can discuss this further another time." I moved toward the door. "Olyvia," my father called, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "This doesn't change anything. You still went behind our backs." I paused, hand on the door handle. "No, Father. This changes everything. And I didn't go behind your backs. I stood right in front of you, achieving everything you said I couldn't. You just refused to see it." With that, I returned to the gala head high, leaving my stunned family to absorb the new reality. The weeks following the Christmas gala were surprisingly quiet. I had expected angry calls or family confrontations, but instead received only silence. Through mutual connections, I learned my parents had left for an impromptu vacation to their winter home in Palm Springs. My brothers were reportedly reevaluating some business strategies. The Anderson family was in retreat. I used this time to focus on my expanding business empire. Riverside Mall's success had opened doors previously closed to me. Banks that had once rejected my loan applications now called, offering financing packages. Developers sought partnerships. Business publications requested interviews. Through it all, I maintained a professional approach, never mentioning my family connections or the personal satisfaction of my success. This wasn't about revenge. It was about validation. It was nearly 3 months before my father called. "We should have dinner," he said stiffly. "Just the two of us." We met at a neutral location, an upscale restaurant downtown, rather than one of the establishments in my mall. He looked older somehow, less imposing than the larger-than-life figure of my childhood. "You've done well," he acknowledged after ordering drinks. "The mall's performance numbers are impressive." "Thank you," I said simply. "I still don't understand why you couldn't have just joined the family business. We could have accomplished this together." I shook my head. "You never wanted a partner, Father. You wanted an employee who would follow your vision. I needed to create my own." He nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. I'm not good at sharing control." It wasn't an apology, but from Richard Anderson, it was the closest thing to one I'd ever receive. My mother took a different approach, suddenly becoming my biggest cheerleader in social circles. "I always knew Olyvia had extraordinary potential," she told friends at her country club. "That determination comes from the Anderson side, you know." I chose not to contradict her public revisionist history. Whatever helped her save face was fine with me. My brothers were the most complicated. James seemed to harbor resentment, avoiding me at industry events and declining invitations to discuss potential collaborations. Thomas, however, surprised me by reaching out. "I owe you an apology," he said over coffee. "I was jealous, if I'm being honest. You broke free and built something entirely yours, while I've always just been following Dad's blueprint." His confession was healing for both of us. We weren't close overnight, but a new foundation was being laid. As my business grew, I found my greatest satisfaction not in proving my family wrong, but in creating opportunities for others like me. I established a mentorship program for women entrepreneurs, focusing particularly on those from families or backgrounds that didn't support their ambitions. 1 year after the revelation, I hosted a family dinner at my newly purchased lakeside home. The dynamics had shifted subtly but significantly. My father asked questions about my business strategy rather than offering unwanted advice. My mother refrained from comments about my appearance or marital status. My brothers treated me as a peer rather than a little sister playing at business. As we sat on the deck overlooking the water after dinner, my father raised his glass in an unexpected toast. "To Olyvia, who proved that the strongest Anderson trait isn't stubbornness but resilience." I smiled and accepted the toast, realizing that while I had once desperately craved their approval, I no longer needed it. My validation came from within, from the business I'd built, the people I'd helped, and the woman I'd become. The truth is, sometimes the people who hurt you most become the catalyst for your greatest achievements. Their doubt becomes your fuel. Their dismissal becomes your determination. I didn't succeed despite my family's lack of faith in me. In many ways, I succeeded because of it. Have you ever had someone underestimate you only to become your greatest motivation? Or have you experienced a moment when those who doubted you finally had to acknowledge your success? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the opinion that matters most is your own. Thank you for listening, and remember, success is the sweetest when those who said you couldn't are forced to watch you do it anyway.